Okay, so now let's link up our search form and our pagination. So I talked about the issue at the end of the last video, but just in case you may have forgotten already or couldn't exactly grasp it, let's go ahead and talk about what's going on here. So at this point, we have our search, and if I go ahead and perform a search here, we see this search parameter go into the browser here or into the URL, and it basically performs a search and everything looks good. So if I remove that search, we can see that we have quite a bit of pages here. So it's up to 8 pages. And then when we perform the search, there are about 5 pages or 3 pages worth of projects that have that value. So now I want to go ahead and navigate through the pages, but I still want to include this search form. So let's say I still want to continue looking through all the Django projects. But what happens here is while we have this search in the browser, when I click on a page here, that automatically goes away. So now we just pass in the page and the search goes away, and now I have all 8 pages. So I want to fix this to ensure that when I'm navigating, the search stays in the browser. Now I've seen a few solutions with this. Some of these do not use JavaScript. Personally, I try to stay away from using JavaScript, but it makes this solution so easy. So if you're not familiar with it, just bear with me. I'll write as slow as possible and I'll try to explain what's going on. But basically what we're going to do is anytime we have something in our search form, and when we click on one of these buttons, we are basically going to submit the search form on each click of the button here, and we're basically going to add in the current page along with the search parameter. So we're just ensuring that this does not go away. So really, JavaScript is actually going to be submitting this search form anytime we click a button. So this is going to be way easier than you can imagine. So let's go ahead and just try building this in. So let's go into our pagination here. So in our root directories templates folder, let's go into pagination.html, and let's also start with our projects because we want to do this for our profiles later too. But let's open up both pages here. So we have pagination and projects.html. So later on, we will actually remove the JavaScript from this page and put it into its own external file. But I'm just going to write this in line here. So let's go ahead and create a script tag. And for the type, let's just go ahead and set text/JavaScript. So we're just going to write some JavaScript and we're going to put all that in here. And the first thing I want to do is grab the search form here. So we have a search form up here. So this is still in projects.html. So I need to use something called a query selector. And I need to grab the search form, so I want to actually get some data from here. So we'll just go ahead and add in an ID here, and let's just call that search form, and let's camel case that, so that'll be a capital F. And now I need to actually query this item. So in JavaScript, for those of you that are completely new, to set a variable, we are going to use the let value like that. You may have seen const or var. So we're going to use let. This is just a different way of doing it. It's more modern. And we're just going to go ahead and get the search form. So we're going to do search form, and we can do document. So we're going into the entire page. That's the document. And we're going to get an element by ID. So just like in CSS, where we can actually access classes and IDs, we can do a class with a dot and then an ID with a pound symbol. We are going to get that form with this value. So document.getElement by ID. What was the ID? Well, that was search form with a capital F. So we'll just go ahead and add that here. So search form, and now we have access to this search form. Now we want to do this one more time. So we'll create another variable. And what we're going to do here is we want to grab all these buttons. So all these pagination buttons, and we want to get them by their class here. So the page link value. So every button on our page has that value. So we also need access to these because we need to know when they're clicked on. So in this case, we'll just do page links, and we'll camel case that too. So capital L. And in here, we're going to do document. So we're going into the entire page, and we're going to get an element by a class name. So get element, and I'll just go ahead and select that. So get element by class name, or elements. So capital E, capital B, capital C, and then capital N. So we're getting multiple elements now. So this is going to return back basically like a query set of items because there are multiple elements with this class name. Whereas an item by ID will return back a single item, which will be that search form. So in this case, we're going to get that by its class, and that's going to be page link. So I'm going to add a little note here. So I'll just go into the first step, and we'll just say get search form and page links. So we'll add in an R there. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to check if our search form exists. So if we don't have a search form, a search form, I couldn't say that. So if we don't have a search form, we don't want to allow this to actually work. So we'll just say ensure search form exists. So that'll be the next step. Search form exists. We're going to spend more time writing comments here. So in here, we can write an if statement within JavaScript, and that's going to be if, and then we just wrap that in parentheses, and then we have an opening and closing curly brace. And with JavaScript, indentation does not matter. So we can do that. And now what we want to do is create a loop here. Or actually, first we want to check if the search form works. So I went one step ahead. So we're basically ensuring that we found something here. If this is none, it's just not going to work here. So we're making sure that form is there. And now what we want to do is loop through every single item and add an event handler. So all the page links, we are going to add an event handler, which will basically allow us to do something when that page item is clicked on, or when that page button is clicked on. So to create a for loop, we're just going to do for, and then we can do let equals 0. So we're going to start the index at 0 and then a semicolon. And we're going to say while the page links, remember that's a HTML query set. So we'll just do page links dot length. So while the length of this query set is greater than, we actually need to set the variable. So we'll just do I. So while it's greater than I, let's keep looping. And then on each iteration, we're going to increment I. So we'll just do I plus plus. So that will just increment it. So basically, if we have 5 pages, this will keep looping on each iteration. We will increment I here, which starts at 0, and we can just keep looping until we reach the max there. So we're looping through page links. Now we can actually go ahead and get page links. So we're going to index this by the value here. So we're going into that query set and we're telling us to get each page link on iteration. And in here, and by the way, if this is confusing you, just copy and paste the source code if you're not trying to master JavaScript here. This is really the only part we're going to use this in the application. So on each iteration, we're going to grab each element and we are going to add an event listener. So add event listener with a capital E and L. And with this event listener, we want to listen to a specific event. In this case, we can listen to a click event. So that means every time the button's clicked, we're going to fire off this event. So that's the event we're listening to. So we can add a comma here, and let's just go ahead and add in a function. So we're just going to do a function, and we're going to use something called an arrow function. And in here, what we want to do on each click here is we want to first prevent default. So we don't want anything to happen. So e.prevent default is going to stop the default action from occurring. So let's try this. So we'll just do console.log like that, and we'll just say button click. So we'll do button clicked. So that's the same thing as like a print statement. So button clicked, and let's just see what happens. So if I go to my browser, I'm just going to do Control-Shift-R. Let's do a hard refresh, and I'll do inspect here, and let's check the console. So we'll fix this error. I'll worry about that later. By the time you're using the theme, it'll probably go away. That's actually from something else, so won't worry about that. So if I click on this, we see this alert here. So that's the basically like a print statement in Python, and we're just putting this into the console. So go into inspect element and go into console. So when we click on it, we're seeing the event fire off, and now we're seeing the number of times it's firing off. Now you'll notice it's not actually working. So the pagination is not working. Why is that happening? Well, we are preventing the default action from occurring. So when I click on it, we're not switching pages. Nothing's broken, but we just told it whatever that default action is, go ahead and stop that. So now what I want to do is actually get the current page of each click. So we're going to handle this with JavaScript. So in this case, what I want to do is add in a custom attribute into every page button here. So we'll go through this first iteration. So as we're looping through all the pages, let's go ahead and add in a value. So after class here, let's just do data. And we can basically add in our own custom attribute to HTML elements. So I'm going to call this page. So we set it by setting data and then the name. So we can basically add in as many as we want, or any attributes as we want to a page here. So we're going to do data page, and we're going to set that value to the variable here. So I'm going to scroll over, and we're just going to pass in the page. So let's take this value now, and let's also add it to this link right here. So this second link, so basically the inactive one. We'll paste that in there. So we do data dash page, that's the custom name and the page value. Now to do this to the previous button and the next button, we'll do the same exact thing, except for that value will look a little bit different. So we'll just do data dash page equals to, and then in quotes, all we're gonna do is grab the actual value from here. So we'll just take this, and we just wanna know what page that user's going to. So in double curly braces, and now let's take all of this. Actually, no, we'll just hand code that. I don't wanna confuse anyone here. So we'll go to the next value and we'll do the same thing. So we're simply applying the custom data attributes because we need to access it by this. So we'll just do data dash page, and this is going to be set to the quotes and double curly brace, and we'll just pass in this value now. So query set dot next page number. So if I add that in here, let's scroll to the right here. So if I add this in here, we see all the page buttons now have this value, which will simply hold the name or the number of the page. So what's the next thing we want to do here? So we stop the default. Now we just want to get the data attribute. So get the data attribute. Okay, so probably a misspell, but that's a comment, so we won't worry about that. I guess we'll fix it. So now let's go ahead and create a variable called page. And in this case, we can use something called this, and it's kind of like the equivalent of self in Python, like a self inside of a class. So in this case, we use this keyword, which is like a built-in keyword in JavaScript, and we can access this .data, which in this case, this is going to be the button we clicked on. So we're adding the event handler to the current link. So we're doing this .data, and then that's going to be data set actually, and then we'll do .page. So we called the data attribute or the page attribute. I guess we gave the custom attribute the name of page. Okay, so we get that value, and let's go ahead and console that actually. So let's just do console.log, and we'll say page. And in this case, let's just add that in here. So we'll just do page like that. So we're going a little bit slow. Again, I'm just making sure that you Python developers don't freak out here that we're using JavaScript. So let's go into the console. We won't worry about that error. And let's click on one of the page buttons. So if I click on this, let's see what just happened here. So page is not defined. Let's see what's going on here. Console.log page. So I probably wrote the function wrong here. So let's actually do this. Let's just add in function in front of, let's just do function like this. So we'll add in function before these brackets here, and we'll remove that arrow function. Crap, what'd I do here? Okay, so I can just remove the arrow function right there. So we'll just trigger it that way, and let's try this one more time. I feel like that messed up this keyword here. So this value. So let's save that again, and let's refresh it. So now when I click on each page button, we can see the page. So I can see 2, 3, 1. So it actually has the value. So we have 2 more things that we need to do here. So we simply added the event listener on click. We want to get that page value. Now the next thing we want to do, we'll just add this in. We'll just say add hidden search input to form. Okay, so what do we want to do here? So now we want to get that search form. So we'll just do search form. So this search form, and we can actually add in another input field. So we'll just do search form dot inner HTML, and this basically allows us to add HTML content. So we'll actually go into this form, and we're going to add in another input field using JavaScript. So we'll add in an input value. So we can just do plus equals, and then we're going to use something called we're going to use backticks. I totally forgot what the name of these were, but we're going to use the backticks here, and we'll just do input here. And there's a reason why we're using backticks, so make sure you use those. And then we're going to do value equal to, and this value here, we can use the dollar symbol and then 2 curly braces, and we can actually pass in a variable here. So that's why we use the backticks. Oh, it was template literals. That's what it was called. Completely forgot that. So for the name of the input field, I'm just going to set this to page. So that's what we want to send it as. So in single quotes here, or in double quotes, that's still inside of the template literals or the backticks. We'll set the value of page here, or the name to page. And then we're going to set the value of the form to hidden. So we don't actually want to see this. So we simply add in this input field to a form, and let's close it up now. So we just got this input field, we put it to the form, and we pass in the current page value. Now all we need to do is simply submit the form here. So now we can just do search form. So we'll just add in a comma here, or comment. So we'll just do submit form. So now we'll just do search form, and we can use JavaScript to submit it, and we're just going to use the submit function, and that's it. So the form will be submitted. We won't be able to tell a difference from the front end, but what we just did here is we're going to get the current page that we clicked on. We're going to add in this value, and then the form will be submitted. So that's why we prevented the default, because we wanted to add this value and then let JavaScript submit it. So now let's go ahead and refresh this, and we actually have a value here. So let's just do Django again. We see that query in the URL here, and if I hit page 2, look what just happened here. We are still within 3 pages, but if you look at the URL, we still have our search query, but now we have this and symbol, and then page is 2. So we're basically sending 2 values to the backend. We're still sending Django, which before was just removed because of that page button click, and we just added in the page value. So now I can do a search and then search all of the values, or navigate all the pages with that search value. So that is it. That's all we had to do. Now we're just going to do some cleanup, and we also want to apply this to the profiles here. So in order to apply this to the profiles, we don't need to really do much here, because we already have our JavaScript inside of pagination.html. So all we need to do is just ensure that the search form inside of profiles has this ID. So we'll just go to our users app, and inside of users, we'll go into profiles.html, and let's just do ID, and we're going to set that to search form with a capital F. So I'll just save that. We can close out our profiles, we can close out our projects. And the last thing I'm going to do here is just put this into an external file. So it's not good to write your JavaScript in line here. I'm not going to go into why too much here, but basically if you're writing your JavaScript inside of your HTML file, you're more vulnerable to things like XSS attacks. So I just copied all that. We're going to remove it, and let's go into our static files here. We'll go into JS, and let's just do new file, and we'll just say main.js. So in here, we're going to paste all that in here. We can get rid of the script tags, because now we already know that this is a JavaScript file. So if I save it, it's going to fix the indentation for me, and we have that file, but now we just want to apply it to our pagination. So in this case, let's just apply this to our homepage. So what I'm going to do is just make sure to save this. Let's close out pagination.html, and let's go into main.html. So we'll go in here. Let's go to main.html. So where is that? Here we go. So at the bottom, all I'm going to do is just copy this script tag. We'll duplicate that, and we'll go into JS here. So we'll go into JS, and then main.html. I mean main.js. So let's see, static JS main.js. Okay, so that should link it up. So that JavaScript should be available on all pages. So this is now available. So let's try this again. Let's refresh it. I'm going to check the console. Let's make sure that we don't have any errors specifically to that. So we can close that out, and we'll go into projects now. We'll go ahead and navigate these, and there we go. So the search is working. If I do Django, if I go ahead and click that, everything checks out. So the last thing I'm going to do here is just fix up the pagination. So let's just output like 6 values here. So now that we're completely done with that, we'll go into projects, and inside of our view, we'll just go into projects, and we'll just say allow 6 projects. That'll look better. So that's it for pagination. I'm just going to get rid of everything here, and everything checks out now. So now the search form and the pagination works together, and we are officially done with this part.